Hey guys, welcome to this training video series. In here, I'm going to teach you how to use a simple but most effective function in a JavaScript world. It's called AJAX, especially in terms of jQuery AJAX. So we have this screen on our screen, that you can see there's a regular table which has 4 columns, which is ID, activity, seat, work, and exam. And this is getting populated from MySQL via the PHP. And not to worry, I'm going to go through all the code that will build this table and all the other functionality that it does. So before I go into that, I want to show you what this thing does when I click on any particular field, how it will let me allow to edit the field, and then when I click out of it, it's going to save the data via the jQuery AJAX function, and then it will save it into the MySQL, and then at the bottom right over here it's going to display a message that says, hey, I have updated the data via the jQuery AJAX function, and this is what I did. So here we go. So just by looking at it, it just looks like a regular HTML table. Nothing special about it, unless you click on any one of the field, any one of these 3 columns, which is activity, seat, work, and exam. So if I click here, and then you saw that it turned that particular cell into yellow, but if I click out of it, it turns it back into a regular table. So if I click in it, double click it, and just start typing something in there like blah 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 blah, and then click out of it, and then it goes behind scenes, and soon as I click out of the particular cell or table row, I guess, it's going to go to the jQuery AJAX process and then save the data in there. And at the bottom, it says, hey, this is what I did. Enough for that. However, I did put a little validation in there. Like, for example, if I type in any alphabet in there and then click out of it, it's going to say, hey, there's an error in there. It's only accepted. It's only going to accept the number value. So I can type the one back in there, and then you saw right at the bottom, it changed the field to say this is what I updated. So let's look through the code, see how this little bad boy gets built and processed via the AJAX jQuery function. Let's take a look. So here it is. And actually, before we do that, let's look at our MySQL table. So in this particular database, I created it's called DB students, and in here there is a table called TBL grades. And if I open this up, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. However, I'm only populating 4 of those. But you get the gist of it. You can add another one if you want to. I just want to show you the process behind scenes. So there's first column called ID. This is all auto incremented, which we need in order for us to identify, hey, which row that we need to update it. If I don't have that, I wouldn't know which row to go under which column. So this is a unique identifier. If you're familiar with the database structure, you know a unique identifier in any particular table will help you, and you will go a long way as compared to if you have thousands and millions of records and you don't know which one you should update. So that's why I always have a unique identifier. I just call it an ID. Some people call it a record ID. Some people call it unique ID. There's a whole bunch of different names. But for my personal preference, I either call it ID or record ID. Enough about that. So then we have the columns. This just helps me to identify, hey, on this row, I want to go to activity column and update this one. So in a nutshell, this is our table that we can look at it. All right, so now let's look at our code where all the AJAX magic happens. So in here, I'm including a few libraries. One of them is the Bootstrap CSS, then obviously the jQuery one for our AJAX function. And then also I'm including the awesome functions library, and this helps me create tables faster based on the your JSON array data. So with this one line of code, you can create a nice looking table as you saw right here. All of this is just created with one line of code. But in any case, let's move on. So this is what's happening here. And then if you're not really familiar with the jQuery, this is a quick tutorial for you. In order for you to use jQuery, you include it in your header or somewhere on the page. I just used the CDNJS library, which is this line of code. You could just Google it. It's called cdnjs.com. And then from there, when you're there, you search for jQuery and you could just copy this line of code and include it just like this. And then if you want to start using it, you include this line. It's called script, and then type is text JavaScript. And then followed by document, which is $ open parenthesis document, and then .ready. So what that means is nothing's going to happen until your document is ready to be manipulated. And then this line of code does all of that. And then followed by the open bracket. And if I scroll all the way down, right here, close bracket, close parenthesis, and then end of script tag. And that's all you need to do to start using jQuery. All right, let's move on. So what I did was, rather than me getting an AJAX data when the page load, I just included it right here. And this part of the process is coming from the top of the page, which is right here. I'm using a library called DB class, which is my personal library that I created. And I use this particular library in all of my databases as far as the PHP goes. So if you're interested in doing that, it makes your life a whole lot easier, and it's very simple to use, and it's very flexible too. I'll put the link in the description for you to start playing around with it and give it a whirl. And if you have your own personal one you want to use it, by all means, go for it. I just want to show you what you can do. So in here, with this library, I'm connecting to the database by assigning my database name to this variable, and then I'm opening up a new database called simple DB class. Basically, all this does is just connect to the database. That's all, nothing special there. As you will see when you go to the link and go through it, you will see, oh my God, it's so damn easy. And then I'm assigning a variable called collection. So basically what this does, this line of code does is it goes to my MySQL table and it grabs all the rows. In this case, there are only 4 rows. And then it says, but this line of code, if you're familiar with MySQL syntax, you already know how easy it is. You just select it. Star means everything in the table. And then from the table name, and then you just grab everything, all the rows that are in there. And then all those rows are getting assigned to this variable called collection. And then later down the road, right here, I'm using a PHP for loop and looping through all those rows. So in other words, here it is. So I got all these rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the columns and everything else. And then from there, I'm looping through all those columns and I'm assigning them, or rather printing it out in a JSON format. So let me show you what that looks like. So if I open up my source code, so this is what's happening. So it says, hey, ID equal this, seed equal this, exam equal this. So this just puts it as a JSON object and all 4 of those rows. Let me zoom this in. I don't know if you can see this or not. Maybe too big. Right here is fine. So here it is. So this is the first line, second line, third and fourth. And this is what I'm doing right here. So now that we have our data array printed out. Now what I want to do is I want to create a table out of it. And as I said before, awesome functions library makes this a lot easier. But if you have another library that you want to use to create a table, by all means, go use it. That's your personal preference. But with this one, being that I have this data array of a JSON object, all I have to do is just take this object or this variable, put it in here, and my table will be created on the fly. I just put the variable name in here, and then assign this to be, hey, this is the function that creates a table, part of the awesome functions library. And then I'm outputting it into a div that is called TBL user data, which we can see at the bottom, which is this div. So at this point, nothing special is happening. All we're really doing is we're creating a table, we're outputting it, and then this is where the magic is going to happen. So once the table has been put into that div, it has a class of table. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say, hey, for all the TDs, which is your rows or cells, depending on how you want to look at it, add a class called row data. So let me zoom out of this and close this out. So we have all of these columns. So all of this is 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, 4 column, and then we have rows. And in HTML, this is known as each one of the cells called TD. So if I right click here and then click on inspect, and let's move this around. So right here. So in this case, this is the very first row, which has the TD right here. And then I'm going to say, hey, assign a class called data row for all of, as you probably see, as I move my cursor up and down, you will see right here how in Chrome, each of those columns gets highlighted. And then if I go down, if I click here, it selects the whole row. And then if I go down, all of those. So basically what is happening is I'm adding a class called row data to each one of these cells. Nothing special here. So let's move on. So that's what's happening with this one line of code. And in the next line of code or next block of line of codes, what's going to happen is it's going to say, hey, anytime I click here, any one of these, let me close this out because we don't need it anymore. Anytime I click on any one of these cells, then I want you to run this code, which is makes it editable. So the very first thing that I'm doing when I click on this data row data rather, sorry, not row data. It is row data, not data row. But you get the point, right? So anytime I click on a class, a field, or a cell that has a class called row data, get the index of that cell. So which means if I click here, it's going to be 0 because that's how in JavaScript are. Everything starts from 0 and then increment up. So this is 0, this is 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to get me the current wherever I click on it. And if the value, the current index column value is 0, which in this case will be less than 1, don't do anything. Because we don't want people to edit our record ID or ID in general in the database, which is this ID equals this column. We want that to be unique and that cannot be edited. So if I click here, I'm going to click, nothing has happened. Because what I said was, anytime somebody clicks on the very first column, don't do anything, just stop everything. However, if I click, if the index is greater than 0, so in this case it would be 1, 2, and 3, then run the following code, which would be add a attribute called content editable true. So even though this is a regular TD, just let me show you what is going to happen. So this is your regular, let's just call for time being and moving forward to this rest of this video. Let's call each of these boxes cell. It just makes it easier. So each one of these cells, so if I click here, so pay attention right here on this highlighted in blue. So if I double click right now, before I do that, there is nothing happening here. So the last thing before one is called raw data. But if I double click on this, as you saw, it added another class called BG, which is part of the bootstrap warning. So it just changes the color. And also it added a content editable, which means I can click on it, type something or whatever I want. And also it gave a little padding of 5 pixels. So this is what's happening here. And then I'm saying set focus to that. And then also I'm adding a custom attribute called start data. Why? Because, so let me show you. So as you saw right here where it says start data equal 1, because if we click out of this particular cell and then click away, if the way that we wrote the program, well, the way that we wrote the program, anytime we click out of the cell, is going to go to AJAX function and then update it to the value of in the database. But if someone just clicked on it and didn't change anything and clicked away, we don't want our database to be getting not million, but thousands of click and then walk away. And then that's just going to put an extra load on your server. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, this is the value, which is 1. If I clicked in here and I clicked out of it and nothing happened, don't do anything, which we were going to do next. So this is what happens when you click out of it, which is called out focus. So in here, the first thing what I'm going to do is remove that color, which is this yellow color, and make it uneditable, meaning no one can edit it once you click out of it for that particular cell. So this is what's happening here. And then I want you to get the current value of that particular cell. So in this case, this is 1. So let me just put this side by side rather than going back and forward. It's kind of confusing. So I can imagine how you are feeling. I'm like, come on, man, stop this crap. Let's make it easier. All right, so let's make it easier for you. So here it is. So it's going to get the current value, which is 1, and going to get the HTML rather than a value because this is a TD and doesn't have any regular input, like input value. So this is what's happening. This is how you get the value if it's something that's just printed on the screen for you. And then it check to see whether or not a jQuery function called is numeric, which means is it a number value or not. If it's not, then it's going to add a bootstrap class called BG danger and put a padding of 5 pixels. However, if it is a number value, but this is where the start data comes in here. So if this number right here, 1, when we click out of it, or when we click in it, it's going to assign that start data to be 1. When we click out of it, then it says, hey, is this start data value attribute, is it different when someone clicked out of it, which means rather than being 1, is it 2, 3, 4, 5, or something else? If it's the same, then just stop, don't do anything else. However, if that logic passes, which means the value is different, then continue on to the else part and go do your thing. All right, so now the next part is we want to get the current index of this particular cell. Remember what I said when we all start with 0, 1, 2, 3. So wherever someone clicked on it, I want to get the actual current index of it. And then based on that index, I'm going to assign the column name. So this is what's happening in here. Get the column index. And then also I'm saying that, hey, get the row ID. Row ID is this. And this is what it's saying. Hey, depending on wherever the person clicked on it, go to the first TR. So in this case, if I clicked here, I want you to go right here and then get the very first TD, which in this case will be this, and get the value of that. That will tell me which row number I need to go and update the value. So that is what's happening in here. So this gets me the row ID, and then now that I know the row index, I'm checking to see what number is it. Is it row number 1? If it is, assign the column name to be activity. If it's 2, then assign it to seat work. If it's 3, then assign it to exam. And then once I have the column name, I'm going to start a variable called row ID, column name, row value, which we just looked at earlier. And then I'm just canceling this out, but you don't have to. You can just delete it, which is fine. And then I'm just passing it back to its original page. However, you can pass this AJAX function to some other URL that you want to. I will leave that completely up to you. And then I'm using a AJAX function in jQuery called post, which is the simplest AJAX jQuery function there is. There are other ones out there like get and all that good stuff, but when you want something really quick and dirty, I use the post. Just makes my life a whole lot easier. And then the first parameter, what it does is it takes the where do you want me to send this information to, which is your AJAX URL. And then second part is what data do you want me to send this URL, AJAX URL to? Meaning, first the URL, where you want me to send it to. Second is what kind of data you want me to send it to. And then it sends it. And then what I'm saying is that I just send it back to the index page, which is the current page. So if I'm going to go all the way up, so then it's going to send it back to here. Hey, checks to see, hey, is the row ID set? If it is, which it will be, someone clicked on it and we made it all the changes that we need to. And then I'm assigning it to the row ID. I'm getting the value of it. I'm getting the column and the row value. And then I'm using, as I said before, one of my own personal libraries to update the information back into MySQL. And then it takes 2 parameters, my update function, well, actually 3. One is the table name, array of fields, which means what fields do I want to update, and then where column, which is where ID equals blah, blah, blah. And then once it's done, it's going to just send this message back saying, hey, I have been updated, and then echo it out with JSON encoded. And then once that's done, it's going to get updated right here. So let's try this. So I'm going to update this to be, I don't know, 5897. And then if I click out of it, it gives me this message. Let's go to our database. In this case, this was row number 2, column seat work. And if I click out of it and I refresh this table, I'm expecting to see this number to change 5897, which it is. Now, if I refresh this page, that number should still be 5897, which it is. So there you have it. Very simple, easy to follow. jQuery AJAX function which will help you to update any value on your form on the front end side back to MySQL database. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like the video, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And also don't forget to check out codewithmark.com. Don't forget to check out codewithmark.com for all your wonderful programming, web technology help that you need to build yourself a great, awesome looking web applications. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later.